Tell me a fact and I'll learn. Tell me a truth and I'll believe. But tell me a story and it will live in my heart forever. The Names Not Numbers Oral History Film Documentary Project is remembering the stories of the Holocaust and is telling the story of the Holocaust for the world to hear, for the world to learn, and to inspire future generations to combat anti-Semitism and all forms of hatred and intolerance. The students were instructed by teachers and professionals. They learned interviewing techniques from journalists. They learned filming techniques and editing skills from documentary filmmakers. The students interviewed, filmed, and edited the 2-hour interviews with each survivor to make 20-minute oral histories that are compiled in the Names Not Numbers documentary at the school. You're about to view the documentary Names Not Numbers, a movie in the making. This film chronicles the students as they are being trained by the professionals and includes their reflections. In it is embedded approximately 10 minutes from each interview. This is the students' work, their filmed and edited interviews. Through this project, our students are preserving history, and they are the witnesses to the witnesses.
It was mostly of being hungry and cold and very, very scared most of the time.
My dad was chased one day by a bunch of Gestapos for some way. He outran them and hid somewhere.
My father, he said, when the Nazis reach Krakow, we leave. And it was a matter of hours practically. They advanced very quickly. Yes, I met them face to face.
Less than 31% of all Americans believe that 2 million or fewer Jews were killed in the Holocaust. Among young Americans, 66% of them could not identify Auschwitz as a concentration or death camp. Names Not Numbers is in its 22nd year, and over 5,000 survivors and World War II veterans have been interviewed for the project, and over 8,000 students worldwide have participated in the project. You are the last generation that's going to have this privilege to hear from survivors, to hear from the eyewitnesses of what went on in this horrific time. So it is the survivors and you who are telling the story of the Holocaust for the world to hear, for the world to learn, and to inspire future generations to combat all forms of hatred and intolerance and anti-Semitism. You are learning history, recording history, and preserving history through your work.
We started to look at Holocaust education differently in our school district and how we're doing it even in New York State. And what we started to do is examine how do we make this come alive. This was a great opportunity and a great partnership for us to begin with Names Not Numbers and for us to start to think about creating a documentary, a video series that's going to allow to keep these memories and testimonials alive. So this year is more special than ever for me because it's starting to take all of the tenets of the Clarkstown commitment that we have and make them come alive. This is going to be a very unique and authentic learning experience, and it's going to elevate the Clarkstown Central School District to a whole new level And that level is going to be far superior to what anybody else is doing in the area of Holocaust education.
Today was the introduction to names, not numbers.
I wanted to do names, not numbers because I love history and I wanted to learn more about the Holocaust.
I chose to do names, not numbers because I saw the documentary last year in our social studies class, and I thought it was a really important thing and how helpful it was to help keep the memory of the Holocaust alive.
I chose to do names, not numbers because I feel that it's important for everyone, especially people our age and people younger, to learn about the Holocaust before there aren't any survivors left to interview.
I chose to do names, not numbers, to spread stories about people who survived the Holocaust.
I did names, not numbers because I think it's important for people to be educated on the Holocaust and for people to acknowledge what people had to go through.
These people who survived, they're not just characters in a story, they're like real people with their own lives. They were normal people just like us who had to go through this.
When you take away someone's name, it makes them feel dehumanized, and you're taking away like a basic right to their identity.
It's important to learn about the Holocaust because you see things that you usually won't see in your lifetime, and you don't want it to ever happen. So you try your best to learn as much as you can about things like this, and you push yourself to stop it.
I'm a descendant of Holocaust survivors. My grandparents have always told me about their stories and how my great-grandmother's mother died in a concentration camp, and there's been many stories about close calls and then moving to the United States.
On a personal level, this project means so much to me because it helps me understand what my great-grandfathers went through to survive the Holocaust and protect their kids so I can be born.
My great-grandma was a survivor in Germany. She got out on a boat with many other people.
I think that learning about this is really important because I'm Jewish, so it allows me to learn about Jewish history and like how we're able to be here today.
I think it's important to learn about the Holocaust to stop any hate before it escalates this much. Everyone is a person, and even if you don't like them, they also have feelings, just like everyone else.
Well, it's important to learn about the Holocaust because so many people died in it, and it was just such a massive killing of the Jews, and not enough people know about it, and it's not acceptable.
I want to meet a survivor because in documents and books, you can read the words and read the story, but you can't hear their voice and hear the emotions and the stories that they had to go through. And it's harder to feel that level of empathy when you're just reading words on a page.
Hearing it from a survivor is you could ask the questions you want to hear, and they could give you more details, and it might be easier to understand and know what you wanted to know.
I first learned about the Holocaust through my mother. She used to read me bits of the Diary of Anne Frank. It didn't seem that important to me. It was just another book that she read. The severity of the Holocaust hit me when I was in my 7th grade social studies class and we were watching a Names Not Numbers documentary. It showed me how the Holocaust affected people's lives, but it showed the more intimate side and the connection between all the people. Meeting a Holocaust survivor instead of reading a book creates a bond between you and them. And it solidifies the fact that the Holocaust did happen and it did affect people in real life.
There are 3 letters I want you to know, and write them down because we're going to be using them a lot. R. R is for research. H. H is for history. What will history teach us? And E is for empathy. How you can understand what someone else has gone through. You have their same feelings. You'll never know, thank God, what these people went through, but you can understand it. Research is the key to help you form questions. You want these survivors to trust you, to love you, almost to be like their grandchild. Asking questions is a way to pull information from the survivors and me, if you'd like. It's not so important just to interview Holocaust survivors, but to know and understand why you're doing it. These survivors that you'll be meeting and interviewing were younger than you are now at the time of the Holocaust. Think about how you might have fared if you were in that same situation.
We had a class with Jeffrey Salgo. He was a journalist, a producer, and he taught us about interview etiquette and what we should know going into the interview with the survivors.
A good interviewer has empathy and knows to like put themselves in the other person's shoes.
One thing that makes for a good interview is to not ask yes or no questions. The problem with yes or no questions, at least in like documentaries, is that if you ask them a yes or no question, they just say yes, then they're not telling their story, they're just saying yes. It doesn't work.
It's always important to listen because you can make sure that you don't skip over details. It helps so that you know what to ask or if it's even the time to ask that question.
Eye contact during an interview is very important because it shows the interviewee that you're listening and you're genuinely interested.
The movie was about a girl that was taken away from her mother throughout the Holocaust, and she had to survive everything on her own. And when she got reunited with her mother, it was a really sweet moment, and I felt really connected to her.
We have 2 cameras, right? The different shot sizes are, someone already said, medium, close-up. The full body one is called wide, right? This is the zoom. It's a ring. It's called the zoom ring. This is our focus ring, okay? I'm going to call this our shot selector, right? We gently put our hand here. We zoom in. We turn left to zoom in, turn right to zoom out, and we get our different shot sizes that way. We're going to start off with a wide. We'll get a medium shot, and then we'll get a close-up. We need to give the editor something to work with. We're going to just go through the different shots, and then when we finally get our final close-up, we're going to switch to someone else in the room. We want to get everyone, and we give the editor, our job is really to get the editor as much options as he can.
We had a class today with the filmmaker to help teach us how to use all the instruments that we will be using and equipment for the interview.
I think today's filmmaking class was really helpful in understanding how we make this movie.
We learned from the filmmaker the different shots for filming, which include the wide shot and close-up.
I thought the filmmaking class was very interesting, learning that there's a bunch of stuff behind the scenes that goes into it. It's not just you turn on the camera and start recording. There's a lot of stuff like positioning and backgrounds and stuff that goes into it.
The rule of thirds is to have someone's face a third away from the edge and a third away from the top or bottom.
I'm proud to arrive today to introduce an inspiring group of students from Clarkstown South and Felix Festa Middle School in my district. They're accompanied by the founders of the program they've been involved with, Tova and Dov Rosenberg, the founders of Names Not Numbers, an organization created to ensure that we never forget the atrocities of the Holocaust. These students' work, along with the dedication of the Rosenbergs, make it possible that we will never forget and that the generations who will come will be able to learn from the stories of the Holocaust. It's great to welcome them. Please offer them the cordialities of the house.
Today I'm going to interview Miriam Edelstein.
I am interviewing Alex Levy.
I'm going to interview Denny Hertzberg. I'm feeling a little nervous, but overall excited.
I'm going to interview Miriam Edelstein. I'm feeling nervous. I'm apprehensive because I don't want to stumble over my words or anything.
I'm going to interview Alex Levy. I'm nervous because it's a very delicate topic. You have to be careful about what you say and you have to be patient.
I'm going to interview Alex Levy. Before interviewing him, we had taken classes about Holocaust. We learned about what happened leading up to the Holocaust and what Hitler did.
Some things we learned about the Holocaust was Kristallnacht, where a bunch of Jewish stores were broken into. We also learned about concentration camps and how Nazi soldiers took the Jewish people to them where they had to work.
To prepare for the interviews, we've had classes with Miss Freeman after school to learn about the past of the Holocaust. Miss Freeman, she's been doing this for so long that she's excellent at teaching us what happened. Learning more about them just was sad to me. I thought to my mind, how can people be this way? And it was unimaginable.
We are going to interview Miriam Edelstein.
I'm going to interview Denny Hertzberg.
I'm going to interview Denny Hertzberg.
I'm going to interview Alex Levy.
I'm going to interview Miriam Edelstein.
I am excited to meet my survivor.
I'm looking forward to getting to know Miriam because she has an interesting story and I'm excited to learn about that.
I'm going to interview Denny Hertzberg. I'm a little nervous because the story is very important, so I want to make sure to capture all the details so other generations can learn about it in the future, but I'm very excited to learn this myself.
Names Not Numbers, Alex Levy.
My name is Miriam Edelstein. I was born in Rudnik, Poland. There are 7 Rudniks in Poland, by the way. And my Rudnik is on the River San. My birth certificate was lost, so it's anybody's guess. Officially, 1934. My father was by far the wealthiest person in the neighborhood. He was very successful, was very well known, and I was the rich man's daughter. And my mother was hovering over me. They call it a helicopter parent these days. They exported wickerware. They made wickerware. They're still doing it, by the way, because in 2018 I was back in Poland for a visit, and they're still doing it in my hometown. And my father had control over the whole process.
My name is Alexander Levy. The Nazis came to power in January 1933. I was born in Berlin, Germany, on March 7th, 1936. My family lived on a street called Jerusalem Street. They were not wealthy. My father was a taxi driver. My mother wound up not growing up very educated, but my mother read a lot. The books that she read were very good books. It was difficult for Germans to leave Germany because they were so embedded in it.
My name is Danny Hersberg. I was born on January 18, 1939 in Berlin, Germany. I know we had a pretty good home in Berlin. It was a condo, I believe. My dad was an attorney in Berlin, but he was never allowed to practice because Jews were not allowed to practice under the Hitler regime. My mom was just a housewife, and she helped out in his mother's place at a haberdashery store in Berlin, which was destroyed in Kristallnacht. During the Hitler years, religion went to the sideline. You were lucky to survive. Berlin had one of the larger population of Jewish people before World War II. Most of them, as you know, were killed during the Holocaust. My family, we go back to the 1700s in Berlin, and my wife did all the tracing. We have the history, good part of it. But yeah, we go way back.
Hitler had written a book called Mein Kampf, in which he basically promised what he was going to do to the Jews once he came to power. Jews were getting beaten up in the streets. The cops would give the Jews the ticket for getting beaten up. There was a boycott of Jewish stores. Jews lost their citizenship. But after Kristallnacht, my father, using his taxi, drove my mother and me to the Belgian border so that we could cross the border, be illegal immigrants in Belgium. Belgium, you could walk through the woods. I really left Berlin when I was 2 years old. My mother had 2 sisters there. They were the 2 sisters that had really raised her. One of the sisters had 2 adult children who were married and had children of their own. We had Belgian papers. The passport was stamped that we were Jewish. My father went back to Berlin. My father had been a soldier in World War I, and so he didn't think anything could happen to him. He was a hero. But of course, eventually he found out that no such thing as Jewish heroes in Germany at that time, just Jews. The day before we were to cross, we were supposed to stay in a hotel near the border. And so there was just my mother and me, but she was told that there was no room at all. And my mother was a fairly convincing woman. And so she asked the manager to come and talk to her. And also she had this very cute baby in her arms. She argued with him for a while. And after a while, he told her that, well, he didn't have a room, but if she wanted, she could go up to the attic, and there was a mattress up there, and she could have that for the night. So she accepted that, and my mother and I slept up there that night. And in the morning when we came down, hotel was completely empty. It had been raided by the Gestapo. There were a lot of Jews in that hotel waiting to cross the border. And they had all been arrested, and we were just safe because we were up in the attic and the Nazis didn't think of looking up there.
I was just born in January 39. Shortly thereafter, my mother got a call from her sister, Edel, who said to her, we were one of the few people who had a hardline phone, still the winding ones, and she says, "It's a beautiful day, take the boy to the park." And my mom was busy. She said, "No, I'm not going to." And her sister got strong with her and says, "Take the boy to the park." And she immediately got the message, took me to the park. And about 20 minutes later, all the Jews were picked up by the Gestapo Nazis from that street. Had we not left, I wouldn't be talking to you. My dad was chased one day on the streets in Berlin by a bunch of Gestapos. For some way, he outran them and hid somewhere, and they left him alone. My mother's sister was married to a Dr. Schubert. They had a marriage for quite a few years, and she was doing the laundry, and her husband's SS Gestapo ID fell out. And when he came back at night, she confronted him. "What is that ID of yours?" He says, "Yes, I'm a member of the Gestapo. I give you 24 hours to escape, or I'll turn you into the concentration camps." Her own husband. That night, my Aunt Edel got on the roof of a train that was going on barges to England through the English Canal, and that's how she escaped, recertified herself, and became a full-fledged doctor in Birmingham. The other sister, Molly, was put on a train in Berlin for a concentration camp. She got to Buchenwald, and when she saw the sign Arbeit macht frei, work creates freedom, which Hitler had on each concentration camp, she was a doctor. She gave herself a shot, jumped out the window or door, and committed suicide.
Brother of my father's, who lived in Berlin, had the foresight to go to the United States. And before he left, he came to visit us. And he said, "This is your last chance. You can join us." And my mother said, "If I go to America, I'll have to wash my own dishes." "No, thank you. Go ahead. You go by yourself." My father was listening to the radio. He said, "When the Nazis reach Krakow, we leave. We go east." And it was a matter of hours practically. I don't think it was more than 2 days. They conquered Poland very quickly. The Germans had tanks and all kinds of advanced military equipment. Poland was still using cavalry. They advanced very quickly. Yes, I met them face to face. My grandfather, when the Germans came to round up everybody, said, "This is my home and I'm not leaving." And they shot him on his doorstep in view of the whole family. My second cousin's husband, he grabbed my father by the lapels and he said, "We're going to leave." Many people clung to their homes, but fortunately we didn't. My mother was out of it. She was frantic. She was running around all over the place. Should we take this? Should we take that? Most of the things they took were useful. A lot of them weren't. But one of the outstanding memories I have, as we left the house, she kneeled down by the kitchen door and kissed the doorstep goodbye, like it was a person or something. You know, "Goodbye, house. I'll never see you again," and she never did. Well, my father was alive during World War I. You know, his experience with Germans was that they were nice, civilized people. It never dawned on him that they could do what they did. We were just leaving. That's it. You do what your parents tell you. I hated to leave my tricycle behind, which was a prized possession, and it was like the envy of all the kids. We moved east, and we went in horse-drawn wagons towards the Russian border. At that time, there was an agreement between Stalin and Hitler, a non-aggression pact, and they weren't fighting each other. So We were trying to get to an area where the Russians were in charge. Each family, more or less, had a wagon. And my mother was crying and didn't know what was going on. And I must have fallen asleep. And the next thing I knew, it was pitch dark. You could hear planes overhead and bombs falling, and nobody was there. And the wagon was overturned on top of me. I was just kicking, and my feet were hitting the bottom of the wagon and screaming, and there was nobody except for the bombs. They tell me it was half an hour, but it seemed like an eternity. They realized that I was missing, and some men came and picked up the side of the wagon and dragged me out of there and pulled me out with the rest of the people. To say I was terrified is minimizing the whole experience. It was horrible. Many, many years later, I was in Israel, in a big place called Yad Vashem, and they had a room where they had nothing but those wagons, just like the ones we left in. And all of a sudden, I got hysterical. I don't know what hit me and why it happened, but all of a sudden, I started crying and carrying on, and it took a while before I calmed down.
We lived in Brussels. As soon as I grew up, let's say I was age 4 at that time, I was hungry. Very, very little to eat. I tried different things. So adults told me not to eat grass or not to eat the bark of trees and so on. But I didn't really believe them. So I tried all of those things to see if, and on those things, the adults were right. It was mostly of being hungry and cold and very, very scared most of the time. Belgians were not supposed to rent apartments to Jews. On May 10th, 1940, the Nazis moved into Belgium, and then life became even harder than it was, and people had to go into hiding. And so for 3 years, I lived in a Catholic orphanage for girls. The Cardinal of Brussels wanted to rescue as many Jewish children as he could. We had to change our names. I became Arthur Martin. That was the name of the largest vacuum cleaner company in France. There was a man whose name was Herr Ollendorf, and he was able to circulate and collect news. And through him, through his sources, he was able to tell my aunt about this orphanage. And so we heard about that. And it was he who told us that we'd have to change our names. Between 1940 and 1942, while there was discrimination going on, you couldn't work, you couldn't rent apartments, you couldn't own radio, you couldn't have bank accounts. There were a whole bunch of anti-Jewish laws, but nobody was being deported, being grabbed off the street or from an apartment and being put on a train. So people weren't all that scared. But after 1942, they got really, really scared. The nuns knew it was very, very dangerous for them to have Jews. And I always wondered, while on one hand, you had these Christians who were trying to kill us because we were Jews, and on the other hand, you had these Catholics who were trying to rescue us to the best of possible when they were in danger of getting killed for that also. There's a movie about what happened to 3 Jewish boys who were in a French school being hidden when the Nazis found them. Both they and the priest who was hiding them were taken away. And there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that both I, my cousins, the nuns, the priest who was in charge of the place, would all have been sent to Auschwitz.
There was a conference of Evian in 1938, July. There were 32 nations present. And at that conference for where are we going to send the Jews from Germany, Hungary, Austria, among the 32 nations, there was one nation who raised its hands and said, we will take up to 100,000 Jews into the Dominican Republic. All the other nations had an excuse. They didn't want us. When everybody got the required permits, my parents also got the permit, and we left through Geneva, Italy. My parents arrived. They had to show their papers, and my parents' papers were okay, and the Gestapo said something on my papers was not in order, so we will return your child after the war. Well, really? What they did after the parents of the ship left, they threw the baby in the air and they all took shots at it. My father wasn't going to have it that they were going to leave without me. He opened the only suitcase they had, took the clothing out, took a rock, put 2 holes or whatever into the suitcase, cuddled me up, put me in the suitcase, put something over me that I wouldn't closing or whatever, that God forbid I would cry, closed the suitcase, and that's how I got out of Germany. There's a book published, The Boy in the Suitcase, that was published about 10 years ago. I was interviewed in New Jersey. We're very grateful. The Dominican Republic really, if it weren't for that country, I wouldn't be speaking to you.
The first place we stopped at was a town named Bilgorai. We all got off the wagons and moved in with whatever people were there. This town was already occupied by Germans, but this was before all the horrors started. And they were just regular soldiers, but there were air raids. Every time there was an air raid, we would run outside and hit the ground. And my mother had a routine where I had to put my face down first, and then my father, and then her, so that if we had a direct hit, she would go first, and then my father, and then me. Being a child, I did not believe her. I thought she just didn't want to get her face dirty. On the other side of the fence, there was a direct hit, and an entire family was wiped out. So yes, the soldiers were friendly, but bombs were falling. It was wartime. The living arrangements were tight. You know, we were all in one room. My father realized that this is not the place to stay. And sooner or later, a bomb will hit us, and we have to get moving. So after we arrived in, I have to call it Lvov, and there we stayed for about 1.5 years. Anyway, about this time, Hitler broke the non-aggression pact and started advancing towards the Soviet Union. And the Russians wanted everybody there to declare Soviet citizenship. And my father, judging by his past experience, said, the Russians are barbarians. We're not taking their citizenship. All the relatives that took citizenship are gone now. They ended up in a concentration camp. My family was sent to Siberia because we were enemies of the state. By this time I was 6. I was also an enemy of the state. And we spent a whole month in a freight car. We were completely locked in the freight car. Nothing was open. We had a bucket to use for a toilet. And if you were lucky and had family, they could hold up a blanket for privacy. Otherwise, you were just out of luck and you just squatted over the bucket. At midnight, they would open the gates and we got to empty out the bucket. And they gave us some kind of mystery soup. And we didn't care what was in it, as long as it was hot and something was floating in it. God only knows what. For pastime, all we had to do was pick lice off each other. For a whole month, don't forget, we never had a bath or any kind of cleanliness procedure. All we could do is sleep on these shelves that the men built and use the bucket and pick lice. And we did that for a whole month. After a month, the train stopped. And when they opened the doors, it was blinding. It was like a desert, except it wasn't sand, it was snow. In any direction you looked, there was snow. Everywhere. My parents used their own wickerware for suitcases. So all the bedding was in this huge thing, and they packed me in with the bedding, so I was relatively warm. It was cold. It was really cold. In Siberia, you don't do things for a living. The government gives you things to do. What my father did was cut down trees and push them down river. And the only time they let them not go to work was when it was 45 degrees below zero. Minus 45 is pretty cold.
The Dominican Republic accepted up to 100,000, but there were no ships available. Very few, mostly Italian ships. Only about 700 maximum made it from Europe to the Dominican Republic. Mostly Germans, number two, Austrians, then some Hungarian and Polish. We arrived in the Dominican Republic. I was the first baby with my parents and 29 other people on the Conte Biancamano, which took 4 weeks to get there in the city of Santo Domingo. From Santo Domingo, it took 11 hours on dirt roads to get to Sosua. We were literally in wilderness, and there were X amount of acres dedicated by the president of the Dominican Republic, who was Generalissimo Trujillo, for the establishment of Jews. And he had also ulterior motives on it. He wanted to whiten the race. We had people coming, as I mentioned before, from many European countries, including those that escaped to the Shanghai ghetto, and people typical like my father and others had to pitch in and build bridges, roads, the houses. Little by little, the houses were built, like the house when we arrived in Sosua in May 1940. We lived there with 10 other people, squished together. We didn't get electricity until 1945. Even though I was a baby, there's a trauma involved. And when we arrived in the Dominican Republic, I did not say my first word until I was 4 years old. After the year 4, I said my first word, which was in German, Mond, the moon. And ever since, I haven't shut up. The joint distribution dedicated, each one of us got so many cows, so many pigs, some chickens, but cattle was the biggest industry there. And they started in 1940, early 40s. And very interesting to say that by 1960, we were the number one dairy industry company in the Dominican Republic. And the story is, you put a Jew anywhere in the desert and he will survive.
My mother came to visit me every other week, and she told me of how my Aunt Paula's children at first were taken by the Nazis. Some of them were taken by the Gestapo off the street. You know, I started wondering, were any of the Catholic girls that we didn't know? See, we had our little group of Jews, and then there were all the Catholic girls there, who always wore little black uniforms. If there were any Jewish children in that group of girls, and I met one of them later on in the 70s. She hated the girls, she hated the nuns, she hated the whole experience. But she was older than I was. But we were all starving. We were all diseased. I wound up in the hospital because of not enough food. We were dirty. We had scabies, lice, but I was there for the full, 3 years. My mother had a boyfriend. People don't stop living while they're hiding. She was madly in love with him. You weren't supposed to work if you were a Jew, but my mother always found jobs. And one day when she came back from work, the neighbors told her, don't go back, don't go back. Her apartment had been raided by the Nazis, and her boyfriend and his best friend had both been arrested and taken away to Malin. She needed a place to stay. She couldn't go back to her apartment now. So she walked over to her sister's apartment. She pleaded with her sister to let her stay in her apartment during the night. During the night, there was a knocking at the door downstairs. My aunt went down to open it, and the Nazis came up and looked all over. They were looking for my mother. My mother was hidden under a bed in a dark place that didn't have the electricity. So the Nazis looked all over for her, and one of them looked under the bed and still didn't see her. And they left. They left everybody. The following night, Nazis came up again and started looking for my mother all over. In this case, they even looked under the bed with a flashlight, and they didn't see her. But this time they were very angry at not finding anything, and they took my uncle. My uncle was an old man already, a man in his 70s, and they took him away. But they left his wife and a cerebral palsy daughter. And my mother survived that night also. My mother and my father, by the way, both survived. All their cousins, all their sisters, brothers, cousins who were adults were killed by the Nazis, except for this aunt and the cerebral palsy girl.
When they unloaded us from the station, they came with a horse-drawn sled, and they deposited us in a schoolhouse. So my father and another man built their own log cabin, everything from scratch. And he got a medal for it because he was so terrific. You know, with a cellar and floor and furniture. He even made the dishes from tin cans. It was a complete house. So we moved into this new log cabin, and within no time there were cockroaches. And we realized that they were drawn by the warmth, not by dirt, because my mother was very clean. And what we did for entertainment mostly was hunt for cockroaches all day. Each one of us had a matchbox and a pin, and we would stick it in a cockroach and put it in the box. And at the end of the day, we dump out all the roaches and see who had the most. And the winner got to put them on the stove. They popped like popcorn. And we were laughing and having fun. We didn't know we were being miserable. It was snowing and snowing and snowing. There were days when the snow was higher than the top of the window. So you couldn't even look out. We were literally buried alive. As enemies of the state, we were allowed a half a kilogram of bread. If you were not a worker, if you were a worker, you get a kilogram. Heaviest can be like a rock. So a kilogram of bread you'd think was a lot. It was a piece like that. As usual, my father was very resourceful. He traded all kinds of stuff that we had in our luggage for assorted things. He got a barrel full of eggs, and he packed them in salt. A layer of salt, a layer of eggs, a layer of salt. The salt is like an antiseptic. It killed all bacteria, and the eggs stayed fresh all winter. So I was probably one of the only children for miles around who had an egg every day. But we had eggs. Then he traded something else for a goat. And the goat lived with us in like an anteroom. It was my job to milk the goat. Scary as can be, had horns. But anyway, I milked the goat, so I had milk. And later on, he traded a pocket watch for a pig. Never mind about being kosher. When life is at stake, you eat pork, you eat anything you can. So he built a roaring fire and climbed on the roof after slaughtering the pig and doing everything necessary. He smoked parts of it, but we did have ham. So we had meat, we had milk, we had eggs. I think the company store had potatoes, which were kept in the cellar. After about a year and a half or two, Poland developed a government in exile. After this agreement, we were allowed to travel. So we went as far away from Siberia as we could get. So we went to Uzbekistan, and that's where we stayed till the end of the war.
Immediately a kindergarten was established, which I was in. Then there was the elementary school, Escuela Cristobal Colon, which I was in. And I mentioned before, we celebrated all the Jewish holidays. Our Hebrew teacher was Dr. Haber. 3 of us, Herman, Freddie, and I, were sent to high school in Puerto Plata. And very interesting, that is basically a Catholic community city. Never did we feel any anti-Semitism. We were welcomed by every family, and in the school was open arms. In Sosua, besides the school, there was a local city hall, and it was very strange. The government didn't bother us because under dictatorship, you watch your rear end and your head and everything with everything you say. We were at a Yom Kippur service. Suddenly 2 black Cadillacs drove up, unknown before. The president of the Dominican Republic, Generalissimo Trujillo, walked into the synagogue. He sat in the rear pew, left the security guards outside, and obviously the services were stopped. My father, others went to greet him. He went to the podium, said, "Ich bin heute a Yid." That means, I am today a Jew. And he welcomed us with open arms. This is your country. And we always had the support of the Dominican Republic.
This bulletin has come to you from the NBC newsroom in New York. The German news agency Transocean said today in a broadcast that the Allied invasion had begun.
Early Tuesday morning, numerous landing craft and light warships were observed in the area between the mouth of the Somme and the eastern coast of Normandy. At the same time, paratroops were dropped from numerous aircraft on the northern tip of the Normandy Peninsula.
This means invasion.
All of a sudden, my father showed up, and all of a sudden he comes up and he tells me it's over. He takes me out of the place. At first I was a little bit scared, but it turned out that it was the Liberation Day of Brussels. And Brussels was liberated by British and Canadian troops, and they arrived in tanks. And my father and I rode in a tramway. And for the first time, I was proud of my father because he wore on his arm an armband of the Belgian flag that indicated that he had been in the Belgian underground. He had actually tried to do something about the Nazis. And I was proud of that. But while we were riding in the tramway, people in the streets were going crazy. Tanks were going through the city very slowly. Young women climbed on the tanks. They ripped buttons off the British soldiers, the Tommies' uniforms. They brought them flowers. They kissed them. You can't imagine what a scene that was. And nobody had arranged this parade or anything. It was absolutely spontaneous.
After the war was over, Poland and the Soviet Union were friends again. We were allowed to come back, and it was the same kind of freight train as we arrived. It took the same month or more to get back to Poland. The only difference was the doors were open, so we did get fresh air. And we did get to step off the train to go to an outhouse. So we didn't have to use a bucket anymore. And if there were people on the station who were selling, say, apples or something, we could get our own. Each one of us was only allowed one piece of jewelry. So I ended up wearing my mother's wedding band because she had an engagement ring also. In Poland, it was like a funeral procession. Finally, we found out that it wasn't propaganda. Every place the train stopped, we found out there were no Jews left. Everybody was dead. By this time, my father realized that communism was taking over. And he said, if we don't leave Poland now, we'll never get out of here. So we went to Sweden. And we lived there for a while, waiting for my uncle to make papers for us. So I lived in Sweden. I went to school there too. That's how I learned Swedish. We moved to Brooklyn, which was disgusting after living in Sweden, by the way. It was dirty, filthy. And one family actually went back to Sweden because they were so disgusted. My parents didn't want to stay in Sweden because it was in Europe. They just didn't want to be in Europe anymore. They were afraid. And Switzerland didn't allow anybody.
From the farm, in the early years, my mom took me on a horse in the morning to school. And then later on, I had my own horse. And during classes, many times we had to leave the classroom because the horses were kicking each other and we had to separate the horses. Then we finally got an oxen wagon where we sat on wooden benches and got to school like that. In 1948, we got our first Chevrolet station wagon. All the radios had shortwave, and we had what was called the Deutsche Welle, which was a German station. And remember, most people only spoke German. And every night, my parents and others listened to the Deutsche Welle to be kept up on news. Second, third generations in the 1950s, even the original people that arrived, we had a large immigration to the United States, a few to Canada, and 2 crazy families back to Germany. As second, third generation moved to the United States, it really made it difficult in the later years for the community to progress. And today, there's only a handful of us that are active in the Dominican Republic, but where it'll be generations from now, we all ask ourselves that.
Meeting Miriam, it was great. She had such an interesting story. I really appreciated that she was willing to talk about it with us. It's very brave of her to share this story because it is traumatizing what she went through because she was so young. I hope that we learn from our mistakes because we know that there will always be hate, but it's our job to not let it get that big where it wipes out people. People shouldn't be dying because of feelings that we have towards one another.
I interviewed Alex Levy. I feel proud of what I did because now I really get a good understanding about what people had to go through, and I got to hear from someone with firsthand experience.
I think we learned from the Dominican Republic that it is good to welcome people that need help, that it could save a lot of lives and a lot of future lives.
Alex was really nice. It was really great to hear his story. Thank you for coming in and letting us interview you.
I interviewed Danny Hertzberg. I think it went really well. It was really great to hear this story from him and everything that he went through and having it like firsthand. He said that there was 32 nations at the Evian conference, but only one of them was willing to take Jews in, which was the Dominican Republic. They did a good deed while everyone else wasn't willing to, and they helped keep Jews alive. It's important to stand up for our rights as well as other people's.
What we can learn from the Holocaust is that this is such a horrible, disgusting thing that happened, and we can learn that to recognize hate and recognize and learn to stop it before it escalates.
I feel honored that Alex Levy trusted me along with the other people, names and numbers, to share his story, which is basically him reliving the trauma.
I interviewed Denny Hertzberg. I was inspired by the way his parents took action, and even when he was stuck before he got on the boat, they put him in the suitcase and they wouldn't leave him behind, which I felt was really inspiring.
To your generation, if history is not told, it's all forgotten. Well, it's a very important story for generations to come, and it's important for them to know how we survive. I say it's difficult today, and it's going to be difficult tomorrow.
Be involved, care about each other. Don't say that's not my problem. You have to think for yourself.
We're all human. If you love people, you've got to love all people. We're all the same. Some of us individually are more talented than others and so on, maybe different colors, maybe different features, but those things don't matter. It makes no difference. They all want to do the same thing as you want to do. They want to see their children grow up loving other people, no matter how different they are.
My message to this generation is that nobody should ever be identified by how they appear rather than just being a person, because we are all like one another.
Always try your hardest, even through like the hardest times of your life.
My message to my generation is to be kind. It's pretty easy to be kind, and it's better to be kind than to be, I don't know, mean.
As individuals, when we see hate, we should stand up against it, because even little things like being rude to one person, it means the world to them if you stand up for them, and you don't want it to become this big thing, like, God forbid, like the Holocaust again. So we have to stand up against it.
Be prepared. Stand up to hate.
We should treat everyone as equal, not based on religion, ethnicity, race, or anything.
Silence is a bad thing. And if something like this is going on and no one says anything about it, then nothing will change.
My message is don't judge a book by its cover. When I thought I was going to interview a Holocaust survivor, they were going to be like mean, but I didn't realize they were actually going to be nice and caring.
My message to my generation is probably to like stand up for what you believe in. Even if other people don't do the right thing, you should still do the right thing.
Always stand up for what's right, even if it seems scary. All you can do is try. Sometimes being scared is okay. It's part of being human.
My message to my generation is just like remember that everyone is a person and they all have feelings. If you start saying stuff about their religion or their race, it really does hurt them even if they don't show it.
My message to my generation is that hate is universal and you need love to combat it.
My message is if you love people, you should love all people. We're all human, we all have the same DNA.
Silence is really loud, and if you don't speak out against people that are against you, nothing else is going to change.